I never expected that, at 75, the deepest wound of my life would come from the very child I once held against my chest. I had spent the morning baking chocolate chip cookies, the same recipe my son used to beg for when he was little. He always said no one in the world made them better than his mother. I wrapped them carefully in foil, tied them with a small ribbon, and decided to surprise him. I never told him I was coming. I thought it would be a warm visit, a simple moment of love. His backyard gate was slightly open when I arrived. I pushed it gently, hearing soft laughter from behind the tall hedge. I smiled at first, imagining the grandchildren running around. But then I heard his voice, my son's voice, sharp, irritated, and nothing like the boy I raised. "She's getting worse every week," he said. Then his wife's cold voice followed. "I know. And she's living too long. Why is she even still alive?" The world stopped moving. My hands froze around the cookie container. My breath caught somewhere between my throat and my heart. For a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, I misheard. But then my son replied, "We have to do something soon. I'm tired of babysitting an old woman." Old woman. Not mother. Not mom. Not the woman who worked double shifts, patched his clothes, stayed awake at night praying he'd have the life she never had. My knees trembled, but I forced them to stand strong. I leaned closer, barely breathing, listening to the two people who should have been my family tear me apart like I was a burden, an inconvenience they wanted to throw away. His wife sighed dramatically. "I found another nursing home. Cheaper than the last one. We can push her to go after the holidays." Push me. As if I were an object, a piece of furniture they no longer needed. My eyes stung, but not a single tear fell. At 75, you learn to control your emotions the way young people control their tempers. I turned away from the hedge quietly, pressing my palm against my chest to steady the storm building there. I could have walked away. I could have left silently and cried in my small apartment like so many nights before. But something inside me, something older, wiser, fiercer, rose like a flame. I did not leave. I walked toward the back porch slowly, calmly, like a ghost who had just discovered her own grave. When I stepped inside the house, the familiar scent of the living room wrapped around me like a memory. This was the very house I bought decades ago, brick by brick, dream by dream. I was the one who saved every cent when my husband passed. I was the one who paid the mortgage while raising a child alone. Every wall held a piece of me. But now the family photos I once hung proudly were gone. My belongings, my books, my knitting basket, my little porcelain bird collection, were tucked away or missing. The home no longer felt like mine. It felt like I was just visiting someone else's life. My son walked in through the sliding door, startled to see me. His smile was strained, almost nervous. "Mom, you're here? You should have called." I smiled back, a soft, careful smile that hid everything. "Oh, I just wanted to bring you something sweet," I said, lifting the cookies. Inside me, though, something had shattered, and something else had awakened. This was not the day I lost my son. This was the day I found my strength. For the rest of that afternoon, I moved through the house like a quiet shadow. My son and his wife acted as though everything was normal, but I knew they were wondering how much I might have heard. I could see it in the way they glanced at each other, the slight stiffness in their shoulders, the fake politeness in their voices. I sat on the sofa, the one I had bought 10 years ago when my son first moved into this house. The fabric was worn now, but not from my use. I rarely sat here. I was always told I was too slow, too messy, too old-fashioned. Somehow, old mothers leave wrinkles in furniture, but daughters-in-law leave none. My daughter-in-law busied herself in the kitchen. She opened a glossy pamphlet and placed it deliberately on the coffee table in front of me. A nursing home brochure. She didn't even hide it. I picked it up gently, my fingers tracing the bold words. "A peaceful place for seniors who need supervision." Supervision. As if I were a child who might wander off into traffic. She sat across from me, crossing her legs. "Just some options," she said lightly, pretending she cared. "You know, for the future." The future. The one she clearly wanted without me in it. My son came in with 2 cups of tea. He didn't look at me at first. He looked at his wife, waiting for some silent signal. When she nodded, he finally turned toward me. "Mom," he began, using the same tone he used when scolding his children. "We've been talking." "Yes. I know," I thought bitterly. "You're alone most of the day. You need more structure," he said, pretending the decision was about concern, not convenience. I stirred my tea slowly, so slowly it irritated them. "I manage fine," I said softly. His wife leaned forward. "Well, you say that, but you misplaced your glasses twice last month, remember?" I smiled faintly. I also remembered where I put them. She didn't like that answer. Her lips tightened. All these years, I had swallowed so much disrespect in silence, believing my presence was temporary, believing kindness would return if I stayed patient. But that day, something shifted sharply inside me. I began noticing details that had always been there, but I had chosen to ignore. How they locked certain cabinets when I visited, how my personal mail was always accidentally opened, how my granddaughter no longer hugged me unless told to. I realized I was no longer a mother in their eyes. I was a burden they were waiting to unload. After lunch, I asked to go to the guest room where I kept a few belongings. The room used to feel warm, decorated with small things from my old home. But now it was nearly empty. My quilt was gone. My framed photograph of my late husband was missing. Only one drawer contained my clothes, and even those seemed less than before. I opened my small wooden box, the one where I kept important papers. The latch was slightly bent, as if forced open. Inside, everything was shuffled, the deeds, the insurance letters, the bank statements. Panic prickled up my spine. They had gone through my documents, my private matters, my life. But they overlooked one thing. At the bottom of the box, beneath old birthday cards and a faded wedding announcement, lay the original deed to the house. This house, the one that was still legally mine. My breath steadied. My hands, trembling a moment ago, curled into fists. They wanted to put me away in a nursing home? In a place where I'd never see sunlight without permission? Where they could forget me completely? No. That was the moment the betrayal stopped hurting like a wound and started burning like fuel. I closed the box carefully, locked it. Then I walked out of the room with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. They thought I was fragile. They thought I was powerless. But they had forgotten something important. I had lived 75 years, survived pain they couldn't imagine, and built a life from nothing. They weren't dealing with a weak old woman. They were dealing with a mother who had decided she would no longer be invisible. For the next few days, I moved carefully, slow, silent, and observant, like a fox pretending to limp while secretly mapping the forest. Every smile I gave my son was measured. Every polite nod to my daughter-in-law was a mask. They believed they were winning, that their plan to push me out after the holidays was moving perfectly. But I had plans of my own. I began by packing small things. Never enough for them to notice. A ring here, a photo there. My late husband's pocket watch. My mother's silver locket. Things that held memories, not value to them. I placed each item into my handbag or my old knitting bag, and took them little by little to my friend Margaret's home 2 blocks away. Margaret was one of the few people I trusted left in this world. She was 82, sharp-minded, and had survived 2 husbands, 3 surgeries, and a lifetime of gossip. When I told her everything I overheard, she didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She simply nodded. "Then it's time you protect yourself," she said. "And maybe let karma do the rest." I didn't want karma. I wanted clarity. I wanted freedom. And in some small quiet part of my heart, I wanted them to feel what I had felt that day in the backyard. Margaret helped me contact a lawyer, an old friend of my husband's. A man who still respected me as someone more than an aging mother. His name was Robert. When I walked into his office, he stood up immediately and pulled out the chair for me. Something my own son hadn't done in years. "What can I do for you?" he asked warmly. I placed the worn deed on the table between us. "I want to make some changes," I said. For 2 hours, we discussed every detail. He didn't speak down to me. He explained everything carefully, and I listened with more focus than I'd had in decades. We rewrote my will. We transferred the house into a trust only I had access to. We moved my savings into an account they couldn't touch. We canceled automatic transfers my son had set up without asking. And most importantly, We created documents that would legally protect me if they tried to force me into a care home. When I signed the final document, Robert looked at me thoughtfully. "You're doing the right thing," he said gently. "Children sometimes forget the roots that held them upright." I left his office feeling 20 years younger. That evening, my son and daughter-in-law sat me down again, pretending to be compassionate, pretending to care. "Mom," my son started, "we think you should try a nursing home for a week. Just a trial. To see if it suits you." I smiled softly. "If that's what you think is best." His shoulders sagged in relief. His wife smirked like she had finally tamed a stubborn pet. They thought surrender meant defeat. They didn't realize surrender can also be strategy. The next morning they packed a small bag for me. They didn't know I had already moved the things that mattered. I let them drive me to the trial week home. It wasn't the worst place, but it wasn't home. It smelled of medicines and quiet despair, filled with people who stared at walls as if waiting for the end. My son hugged me awkwardly. "You'll be fine. We'll check on you." They didn't. Not that day. Not the next. I wasn't surprised. While they ignored me, believing I was safely tucked away, I finished signing the last of the legal papers with the help of a kind administrator, who owed Robert a favor. By the end of the week, everything was ready. One final signature. One final phone call. Then the plan would unfold, not with shouting, not with anger, but with silent precision. A mother's revenge doesn't need to be loud. It only needs to be final. The morning sunlight spilled through the curtains as I stepped out of the car. My son and his wife were waiting, looking smug, convinced that this would be the day I finally surrendered. They had driven me to the nursing home again, thinking the legal safeguards I had quietly put in place were meaningless. They didn't know. They couldn't have imagined the depth of resolve a 75-year-old mother could summon when her dignity and home were at stake. When we arrived, I told the administrator, quietly and politely, that I would be signing a few final documents. He nodded, knowing me from the previous week, and guided me to a small office. It felt ordinary enough, calm, almost peaceful. Yet beneath it, the pulse of justice thrummed. With the pen in my hand, I finalized the transfer of my house into a trust controlled by me, ensured all accounts were inaccessible to my son, and confirmed that nothing could be taken from me without my express permission. Meanwhile, back at the house, my son and his wife were arranging my room, believing I would be gone for weeks. They had no idea that every key, every bank card, every legal paper I owned had been carefully placed out of their reach. The house, their perceived prize, was no longer theirs to claim. By the time I returned, the stage was perfectly set. I drove quietly, parked in front of the house, and walked through the familiar gate. The backyard, the scene of their cruel words days ago, greeted me. And then I heard it, my son, speaking to his wife in that same tone of entitlement and disgust. "Why is she even still alive?" My lips curved into a small, calm smile. I didn't hide. I didn't run. I didn't tremble. I walked through the backyard, each step deliberate, echoing in the silence of their disbelief. They froze. Their faces went pale as they watched me approach. My presence, the quiet certainty in my posture, the calm fire in my eyes, was the last thing they expected. I stepped inside. They tried to stop me. "Mom, wait," my son stammered. I raised a hand, gentle but firm. "No," I said. "I heard everything in the backyard. Every word." Shock paralyzed them. They could not comprehend that the woman they had dismissed, belittled, and plotted against had become the architect of their downfall. "I am your mother," I continued, my voice steady, unwavering. "I raised you, sacrificed for you, and gave you everything I could. But a mother is not furniture. A mother is not disposable. And I will not be treated as either." I led them to the front of the house. I let them see the locks had been changed. The bills had been settled in my name. The accounts they assumed were theirs were inaccessible. The house, the place they thought they owned, was legally under my control. Panic flashed in their eyes. My son's shoulders slumped. His wife's mouth opened and closed, as if words might save her, but none could. They were forced to confront the consequences of their cruelty, the weight of their disrespect, the sharp sting of entitlement crushed under the weight of justice. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I didn't gloat. I simply smiled, calm and dignified. I packed a small bag, just enough to begin my new life, and walked out the front door. Each step was freedom. Each breath was relief. I had been betrayed, yes, but I had survived. And now I was reborn. They were left behind, facing their choices and realizing too late that cruelty never wins. Peace, independence, and a home that was truly mine awaited me. The sun was warm on my face as I walked away. My past was behind me, but my future, my own unclaimed and glorious, stretched ahead. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive.